Next up, Elaine!
I want to say thank you, and thank you for letting me be here. It's just been amazing. I'm feeling really full. But I want to tell you that when I was about 8 years old, my mom called me into the living room. And so I walked down the hallway, and I leaned up against the wall by the wall heater, and I saw my dad in the living room, and he was sitting on the couch behind the newspaper. My mom looked down at me, and she said, "Your brother tells me that you've been telling him that your dad's been doing stuff to you. Is that true?" And I said, "Yeah." And she looked at my dad, and she said, "Is that true?" And he never looked up from the newspaper, and he said, "I don't know what she's talking about." My mom looked down at me, and we had this conversation. And every time she brought my dad into the conversation, he never looked up from the newspaper. And he'd say, "I don't recall what she's talking about." And I got mad, and I yelled at him. I said, "How can you not recall? It just happened yesterday. It happens all the time." But that was the end of the conversation. That day, I learned two things. One, when I have the courage to be authentic and speak the truth, it doesn't matter. And the second is, I don't matter. And that created a long history of just damage in my life. And the hypocrisy became the norm, and I was behind a mask the majority of my life. So it probably won't surprise you that I became a licensed marriage and family therapist and an ordained pastor. And I spent a lot of time, I'm a professional codependent. I just get paid a lot to do it. So I ended up spending a lot of time in my personal healing, and then also with my education, with all that I went through, and then the professional help I did with other people. But I found out that my clients would get stuck over and over and over again. They would just get stuck. They'd go so far, and they would get stuck. And I'm like sitting on my couch one day, and I'm like, "God, why?" And I heard two words. You want to know what they are? Identity abuse. Everybody say that, identity abuse. And I thought to myself, identity abuse, what does that mean? I would have never put those two words together, identity and abuse. I mean, I've heard of sexual abuse, physical abuse, but how did my identity get abused? And I realized that my identity that God gave me, for those of you who've heard that story, God gave me an identity. It got abused at a very profound level before I was even aware that I even had an identity. So I grew up living with that the rest of my life. And so when I started telling my clients that, it was amazing. It was amazing the changes that I was seeing. And I'm hoping somebody here is getting breakthrough because of the knowledge that there's a label for it. So I created a 12-step lesson that I put on identityabuse.com. It's called the Identity Abuse Busters Program. And I love teaching this. And there's three things that are the overarching themes. One is you have an identity that can be rediscovered. The second is the enemy always lies, and we can learn how to detect that when it happens. The third is you can learn how to choose to believe truth even if it doesn't feel true. It's a choice. It's a choice. So I'm happy to say that 13 years later, when the police came knocking on my door, I was able to once again get the courage to tell the truth, and my dad did go to jail. I'm just really thrilled to be here today to let you know that I am proof, and you will be too, when you choose to know that the truth will set you free. Thank you.
Give it up for Elaine! Just real talk, starting to get a little, how are we going to judge this thing? I don't know.